Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we welcome Natalie Lue, the host of the Baggage Reclaim Sessions podcast and the author of 5 books, including The Joy of Saying No, to have a conversation with us about people-pleasing. Natalie is a leading voice on boundaries and people-pleasing, helping people understand how their emotional baggage interferes with their ability to live authentically. Together, we'll delve into what people-pleasing truly is and explore the 5 distinct styles of people-pleasing Natalie identifies. We'll also discuss how people-pleasing often originates from childhood experiences and how it manifests in our adult relationships, particularly in dating. Natalie will shed light on why people-pleasing can be a significant barrier to genuine intimacy and the importance of embracing conflict as a natural and often necessary part of healthy relationships. We'll also examine societal norms, the ways we're socialized, and how the era of obedience have all influenced our tendencies to people-please, and why understanding and respecting differences rather than merely mirroring others is crucial for authentic connections. Finally, we'll explore the vital role of boundaries and breaking free from people-pleasing patterns and how to recognize and change these behaviors to foster more fulfilling relationships. So if you're ready to change your people-pleasing habits and create more fulfilling relationships, this episode, it's for you. Let's do this, flirties, and meet Natalie.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, on the show today, we welcome Natalie Lue, the creator and host of the Baggage Reclaim Sessions podcast, author of 5 books, including The Joy of Saying No. Natalie is also a dating and relationship coach, and today we're going to be talking about people-pleasing, boundaries, and saying no. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Benjamin. I'm excited to chat.
I am excited as well. Really, this is such a fun and cool conversation for me already. As we were checking in a little bit before hitting record today, I was introduced to you by another guest on Flirtations, Anna Goldfarb. We talked about modern friendship and our social connections. And since then, I got to say, I have been listening to the podcast. I've been telling all my friends and family about the Baggage Reclaim Sessions. I'm a fan.
Oh, thank you. Anna is amazing. I loved your episode with her, by the way.
Thank you.
And she's a great homie. And it's so funny because obviously we met online through when she interviewed me for a piece for the New York Times. We've now met up in London when she was over. We've become good pals. She's amazing.
Yeah, she was really, really fun to talk to. And here at the start of the episode today, I usually ask the question, right? How did you get started in this work? Or what was your inspiration? But today I want to take a twist on that on that question and ask you about how you came up with the name for your podcast and some of the themes that you talk about.
Ooh. So I started writing Baggage Reclaim as a blog back in September 2005. It was back when I had shitty taste in relationships. I was always involved with emotionally unavailable men or Mr. Unavailables who tended to be mommy's boys and who would chase and then back off once things got going. I was always like, what is it about me that makes these guys just like suddenly like become unavailable?
Right.
And when I was sort of in the midst of going through a health crisis and experiencing some major epiphanies around what was happening in my life, I realized, oh wow, like I'm the common denominator. I'm the only person who shows up to every act, scene, and moment of my life. That's not to say I was responsible for any of their unavailable and shady behavior. But it's not a coincidence that I was there every time and that I was only interested in guys who sort of fit that pattern. When they were available, I was like, what the hell is wrong with them? Like, why are they being so intense? Why are they like, oh, they're so needy, Right. And so in this phase where I was talking out loud on my then personal blog about why was I in these patterns? Why was I saying I wanted to be with a nice guy, but then I was always with a quote unquote bad boy? And I realized that I didn't really like myself very much, that much of what I did in dating and romantic relationships in particular was really, really messy and came from my pain, this sense of abandonment wounds that I had around, both of my parents. And so there was this thing of like, actually, we need to reclaim ourselves from our emotional baggage. That's where it started from. So I started as this blog in September 2005, where I just wanted to talk out loud about all the things that I was wrestling with, that it turned out that lots of other people were wrestling with, because I used to think I was a weirdo. I was like, this is a unique problem to me. Like, I'm a weirdo. And then you talk out loud about it on your blog. It was on Blogspot back then, which just goes to show how long ago this was. And people were going, "You're talking about me. Like, this is me. You're describing my life." And I was like, that's pretty interesting, because I definitely thought that I was a bit of a weirdo here and that I was unlovable or something. And so I'd had the blog for, it was 10 years, actually, the year that I decided to do the podcast. And actually the year before, so that would have been 2014, my husband was the one who mentioned about, I've heard about this thing called podcasting, and I really think we should do it. And I was like, oh my God. And of course, the perfectionists and the people pleasers that kicked in. And I was like, what am I going to call this thing? And how am I going to make this thing? And I labored on it for about a year. And then eventually I settled down. I was like, don't overcomplicate it. I realized like every single time I sit down in front of the mic to do an episode, I'm really about helping people, again, to reclaim themselves from their emotional baggage. It's a session. I want to empower people to experience more love, care, trust, and respect. There's a lot of people who are grappling with not feeling good enough, the sense of abandonment, struggling to say no, intimacy, and that's all about our baggage.
Wow. So good. And I love the concept and just the structure of how each episode it really focuses on a topic. Maybe it's people pleasing, maybe it's perfection, or maybe it's feelings of unworthiness or something like that. And then you get to really stay focused and be with that. And it's like a session.
Yeah.
I love it.
And you know, I'm brought up in Dublin, in Ireland, and we're like, a session is like, you're really getting on it. It's you're gathering, it's intense, and I do feel like actually when I sit down, even though I'm on my own, typically, although sometimes I have guests as well, like it is a session. I'm gathering around. We're going to go for this, and we're going to have a good time while we're at it, and we're going to come out all the better for it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love about doing this work, whether it's podcasting or coaching, is like so often we go through our lives and we feel like we're the odd one out. We feel like we're the weirdo. We feel like we're the only one having this experience that we're having. And then when we talk about it and we're able to have conversations about it and be honest with ourselves and just share our vulnerabilities and our own experiences, it gives validation to the lived experiences of others, even if we've never met, even if we come from different walks of life or different cultures. A lot of the things that make us human, we experience all over the world. Whether it's people pleasing, or for me, oh my gosh, that feeling of not feeling good enough, right? The perfection. I still feel a little bit of that every time I sit down to hit record, but I've worked with my mindset right. I've reclaimed a lot of my own emotional baggage, learned to empower myself. And I get feedback like this from the flirties, where it's like, oh, I was thinking that, or, oh, this is what I was feeling. And now I'm able to put a puzzle piece into place or connect a new dot, or like something happens.
I totally get that. I mean, actually, I think that's when I realized that there's something in my speaking up about the things that I think make me weird, not good enough and lovable. Because the moment I speak up, I already know that somebody else feels the same way. And I remember actually in my first book, Mr. Unavailable and the Fallback Girl, which was, is about emotionally unavailable men and the women that love them. But actually, it's read by people of all genders, all different types of relationships. And I mean, I first wrote that back in 2008. And I remember writing in there that it doesn't matter, because I honestly think that people, when we're in it, it's really hard for us to see that it really isn't all that unique. For a start, it's like all of these people read the same playbook. Blow for blow, like I can see what's coming next. Right. But also, I said, it doesn't matter if you live in a big city or a little village, or you're by the beach, or you're in a mud hut, like somewhere, the same issues play out. And what I also find interesting is that people will say to me, I just don't get it. Like, my parents were together. I had a good childhood. My parents loved me. I don't understand. And I say, look, let's be real. If, like me, your childhood was, how should we put it? Messy. I'm putting that gently. But like, you had a lot of pain in your childhood. It was chaos, trauma, whichever. Then, that can predispose you to navigating certain issues, because there are things that you're going to pick up as a result of being in that are going to influence the way you think and feel about yourself and some of your habits. You are likely to try to sort of turn back time. You're trying to revisit the past and heal it in the present through your various relationships and interactions. However, I have come across plenty of people who will say, I had a good childhood. I have a good background. My parents are still together. My parents love me, and they have had the same crappy relationships that I did back in the day. They do the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the overgiving, the overthinking, and the over responsibility. And this just goes to show that we have a bit of a blind spot around this, where I think as humans, and this is of course why we people please, and I know we're going to talk about that more, but we have this thing of like, oh, I'm a good something and I tick the boxes in this area, so why should I have an issue with this, or I should get this? And it's like, no, we need to go deeper here. And it's really about the relationship that we have with ourselves, the emotional baggage we've accumulated along the way. You know what? We can even accumulate emotional baggage from what we might see as the good stuff in life as well. Absolutely. And this is where we have our blind spots. Yeah.
And we're going to get into people pleasing. Let's go deeper. Starting to break down people pleasing. I'd love to hear from you the 5 styles of people pleasing. This is something that I learned honestly relatively recently, where I think if you're on social media or just like the internet in general, people pleasing is a very buzzy term as of late. It seems to be everywhere. And I think it can be generalized, but giving some specificity to the experience, how might people pleasing show up? What are the different ways, we might interact with people pleasing?
So I'll start with, people pleasing I describe as being the suppressing and repressing of our needs, desires, expectations, feelings, and opinions to put other people's ahead of ours. And we do that to gain attention, affection, approval, love, and validation, and also to avoid conflict, criticism, additional stress, disappointment, loss, rejection, or even what we might term as abandonment.
I'm feeling very attacked.
Honestly, I say this as someone who people pleasing was as natural as breathing to me, and I consider myself to be a recovering people pleaser. Now, we people please because on some level we experience anxiety about something. So people pleasing is also not just, we use it as an anxiety management tool, but it's also a response, it's a response to anxiety, and it creates more anxiety. So we essentially do what appear to be, for all intents and purposes, good things, but for the wrong reasons. Now, as I reflected on my own people pleasing over the years, but also just heard so many stories through my work, through the blog, through the podcast and so forth, just through day-to-day life, I realized that we could be very, as you said, generalist about people pleasing, where you've got typically one camp who are like, people pleasing is a badge of honor. It's a sign of my virtue and what a good person I am. It's a sign I'm really generous. I'm loving and caring and all those things. And then on the other side, you get people going, oh no, people pleasing means you're a doormat. So you're swinging into quite extremes here. And I realized that actually not all people pleasing looks the same for everyone. And as a result, with these generalizations, it can mean that you can have a sense that you are people pleasing or that there is an issue, but you don't really know what it is or why that is there. Okay. Or you can dismiss it altogether and so disregard what actually could be some pretty problematic stuff going on in your life because you're like, well,
yeah,
it's not that. It's not that.
Right.
I realized that people were motivated by different things, and that they pleased in different ways. And so I came up with these 5 styles of people pleasing: gooding, efforting, avoiding, saving, and suffering. Okay. And the names in and of themselves tell you what you use to please. So being or looking good, effort, avoiding. Saving, so the fixing, helping, healing, rescuing, suffering. Yes. And we, like me, my dominant style is efforting, but I have elements of the others. I think particularly gooding and avoiding, maybe even saving to an extent, but not so much the suffering. Yeah.
Okay.
But some people are like, no, I'm very, very strongly efforting. Like if you know which one you are when somebody pisses you off, when things don't go your way. You know, when you hear no, when you feel like you're not liked, what's the first thing you think about? But I've been so good. I only had good intentions. Or is it like, but I've made so much effort, right? Is it like, but I went to such extreme lengths to avoid this? Is it that you go, after everything I've done for you, you know, all that giving? Or it's like, I've practically bled out for you. Yeah. And yet this hasn't worked out for me. And when I came up with these styles and then the book came out, like light bulbs went off for a lot of people because they were like, I feel like called out. I feel like you've been spying on me. People were probably most shocked by the avoiding and the suffering because I think there are a lot of people who know that they kind of almost over-identify with being a good something. Like, it might just be like the good girl, the good guy, but sometimes it's like, I want to be a good Christian. I want to be a good employee. I want to be a good parent, a good this, a good that, good friend. And this, it's not a bad thing to want to be good. But the fact of the matter is that as humans, we've been trained to believe that a lot of things are quote unquote bad when they're not. And so we perform at our idea of good, and it causes us to be disingenuous. We sell ourselves short, and we we really mess with our well-being in the process. But the avoiding and the suffering, that shocked. They're the ones I probably, and actually even maybe the efforting to a certain extent, because people know that the helping and the giving and the saving, they know that's in the people-pleasing realm. But the effort thing, they were like, oh, the avoiding, they were like, wait, what? And in the suffering, they were like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right. This is really interesting. We're going to stay here for a minute, and I want to come back to something we were talking about just a moment ago, and that is how we might develop a dominant people-pleasing type or become a more general people-pleaser. Because what you were sharing was so interesting, where I work with daters and flirties all the time that come from really stable, loving, great, right? Just consistent households. And then other flirties, daters that come from households with chaos or lots of emotional abuse or abuse of some kind. There's a trauma. Maybe they were in the foster care system, right? And it's interesting that we can all take these different tracks to be people pleasers in our adult lives. So where do these tendencies maybe originate?
So unless you're a child right now, I always say you grew up in what I call the age of obedience, which is a period really over several hundred years where the disciplining, communicating, and interacting with children centered on making us as obedient, as compliant as possible. So excessively compliant, like very obedient, particularly with authorities. Now, for a child, an authority is anyone they perceive to have power over them. Yeah. Okay. And I'm 47, and I grew up in a time where it was go kiss that uncle or kiss that relative or that random stranger that's just come around and says, give them a kiss, give them a hug, go sit on their lap, right? And you're going, I want to sit on that person's lap. Not even because I'm sitting there thinking, oh, like they're a creep or whatever, but it's like, I don't want to sit on that rando's lap. Yeah. Right. But this is the age that we grew up in, where it was seen as you were rude, difficult, uppity, all the unpleasant things if you didn't do as you were told.
Okay.
And that came through, as I said, that's happened over hundreds of years. Like you look back and there used to be that saying, children should be seen and not heard, actually came from women should be seen and not heard. Women and young girls should be seen and not heard. Then it was children. Then you've got like the Industrial Revolution, colonization, imperialism. And those centered on, you needed to have groups of people in a place, like for instance, in a factory or a field or wherever it was, like being really compliant. You fit them into this 9 to 5 bubble. You put them into schools because you need more factory workers, further down the road. And so this has come down like we have been socialized and conditioned to be people pleasers, but so were our parents and our great grandparents and so many of our ancestors. And it was this fear of being perceived as bad. And so it was often around like work ethic and your ethnicity and like your gender and like where you live, like your background, how much money you had. Like there has been times, or depending on where you live in the world, where it's seen as if you have a lot of money, then that means that you must be a really good person, as if to say, oh, if you don't have it, well, what's wrong with you? And so we've been socialized and conditioned into this. And what happens is we've lost our no along the way. Okay. Because if you're always being compliant, then you lose touch with your needs, desires, expectations, feelings, and opinions. So you become disassociated from your body. Okay. You become disassociated from all those things. You're disconnected from yourself. And then we're spat out into adulthood. And it's like, oh, well, now you can go off and be an adult. But now we've been trained into these patterns of being compliant around authorities. And we've learned, oh, this is what it means to be a successful person. This is what it means to be a happy person. Let's speak specifically to romantic relationships. When you are dating or you want to be in a romantic relationship, you need to be this kind of partner. And you need to do this kind of thing, like follow the rules. Don't have sex on the first date, but don't take too long because you're going to be like seen as frigid. Make sure you do this. Don't do that. La, 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 la. It goes on and on. So we've internalized all of this stuff around compliance and how to be successful and happy. And then we get spat out into adulthood and we just keep complying. And we don't realize, like for a lot of people who date, they don't realize that what they think is attraction is often anxiety. Something gets set off in them and they go, oh, that person has power. They have the power over me because now they can choose. They can pick me. So now I need to audition. Oh, they're not as available. Ooh, right. I'm really curious about this person. Let me see if I can please them and reel them back in. And so a lot of dating, a lot of the ideas, the rules, even the way the apps are designed really fuels this anxiety. And it's like, well, if we're really compliant, somebody's going to pick us. They're going to swipe right. They're going to do whatever it is. And it's tormenting us because first of all, we can't turn a romantic partner into our daddy or our mommy or the sibling that we, struggled to get on with when we were younger, or our old school bully or the priest or whoever it is. Like that's, and if we don't realize where we're people pleasing, we just keep repeating these same dynamics over and over and over again.
Yeah. This is so interesting because I feel like my experience growing up, talking about the age of obedience, that is so fascinating. Where my parents did divorce when I was 7, but they were very present parents, very loving parents. So I feel like I had good, secure love model for me, even though my parents were living separate, in different households, right? I still had great relationships with them, but I can really relate to that experience of, I just wanted to follow the rules. I just wanted to gain the respect of whoever was in authority. Maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a coach, because if I could be obedient, if I could follow the rules, if I could do right, if I could be seen as good, then that would not only alleviate a lot of my own anxieties, but I would give myself a better chance of being quote unquote successful, right? Whatever that looked like.
I also know being a gay guy, not coming out till I was 18 has been a part of my people pleasing experience and now recovery. I think this is an experience a lot of queer people have across the queer spectrum, where a lot of us tend to be overachievers. We really like to do and be productive. because if we can be valuable in that way as well, that may detract or distract from how we really feel about ourselves, with struggling with feelings of worthlessness and guilt, shame, right? There's a lot there, but people pleasing has definitely played into that experience for me, sometimes as a way to keep myself safe.
But what you were saying, it oftentimes invalidates our own needs, what we really want, our own desires, even our own values, as we chase this external validation or approval.
Yeah. And what you describe there is, as a kid, and of course we still do it as adults, but we make meaning out of things. And up until around the age 6, 7, every experience in our life is sort of filed away automatically, in our subconscious, and the nervous system is registering everything. But then after sort of age 6, 7, we start to make very conscious meaning out of things. Yeah. And so even though, for instance, your parents are present and you felt loved and they were there, on some level, you will have made meaning out of the fact that your parents weren't together. Yeah. You've inferred certain things about what love and relationships mean. Yeah. As kids, you start to get a sense of this is good and this is bad.
Yeah.
And it can come from the most innocent of things. It's so pervasive in our society. Like if you hear about how I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I remember when they were babies, they go, is she a good baby? Like, what does that even mean? But a good baby is a baby who apparently doesn't cry. Yeah. Right? Who like sleeps like all the time. But this is perfect. And it just rumbles on, because then this is what it means to be a good boy. This is what it means to be a good girl. And then things happen, for instance, within your family, and you will take meaning from that. And something that I see a lot, for instance, is, you have the big events that, yes, even if you felt loved and supported afterwards, there's a rupture there. Yes. There's a level of trauma that is experienced by that, because you're a kid and it feels like your whole world is blown up. Yeah. But also within your family, let's say you have a sibling who's always getting into trouble for stuff. And, you hear your parents talking about it or your relatives at the school. You might go, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I'm really good all the time, because I don't want to look like them. I've got to be good. Right? I don't want to get into trouble like them. I don't want to have people talking about me like them. So you design your whole personality around the fact that your sibling gets called that. Or maybe you've got a sibling or a family member who needs, more care. And so you're like, okay, I'm just going to like take a bit of I'm going to be in the background because I don't want to put any demands on my parents, like they're busy. And next thing you know, you are an adult who in your romantic relationships, you pride yourself on being low maintenance, Mr. or Miss No Needs. Yeah. And, you're like, I don't have any needs. I like what you like. I want to do what you want to do. No, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, please keep on. It's so easy. And we're not saying all of this like, oh, it's the fault of, parents or whichever. Of course, they grew up in that same system too. However, we do have to recognize where our fear of saying no and our eagerness to be pleasing comes from. And also, what is our idea of pleasing? Because my idea of pleasing in dating was so messed up. I mean, I would start out appearing to be this confident girl. And then it would just descend into like I would lose myself in my relationships. And I would date guys who I had relationships going from like a few months to like a couple of years where I wasn't even interested in them. When we like they pursued and eventually I felt bad that they were pursuing me. So then I was like, okay, I'll go out. And then it's like, okay, and it's like, oh no, now we slept together. Yeah. And it's like, oh God, like, how am I going to, okay, well, just one more time. Next thing you know, you've been together for 2 years. And this happens so much. It's unreal. It's like this sense of like, oh, well, like, one of the things and this is one I hear from women in particular a lot, where they'll be like, oh, I went on this date and then, I felt like, I kind of felt bad about like not wanting to like go back to their place and, have sex. I knew that they really wanted to have sex. And it's like, they're not going to die from having a hard on.
Right.
Like honestly, it'll go down.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like you had dinner. You don't need to exchange dinner for sex. Like you don't need to be like, oh my God, thank you so much for taking me on a date and giving me the time. Okay, here's some sex. That's jacked up.
It's not an exchange like that. No. If you don't want to go back to their place, absolutely, you don't have to. But you're speaking to so many experiences in dating that I can relate to as well, and how people pleasing comes into the dating process. It's that, yes, wanting to be liked, but this wanting to be like the good partner, it shows up as oftentimes wanted to be the fixer or the helper or the giver, right? Just wanting to give so much of myself, because if I did that, if I could show my worthiness, if I could show my value, then I would be liked, right? And it would also alleviate this anxiety, this core belief I have of not feeling good enough or not being good enough. If I can prove my goodness, then this other person will see me how I want to be seen, right? But ultimately, what you're doing with people pleasing, and oftentimes, is you're trying to engineer and manipulate the connection, foregoing that this other person, whoever you're dating, whoever you're looking to partner with, has their own free will as well. They have their own mind as well. They have their own intentions and desires as well. And it puts too much to chance, so to speak, where you're not actually having the conversations, sometimes the difficult conversations. You're not having the styles or the conversations where you're expressing wants and desires. But I just so relate to, a lot of what you've been sharing so far.
I mean, when you said about, proving your goodness and, showing your value, I felt that in me. I mean, of course, I recognize myself, but I recognize so many others. And the thing is, what we don't realize is that people pleasing is like creating a debt. So, we do all of this giving and suppressing of ourselves. So we create this debt and then we expect someone else to pay it off. The big thing, though, is that people pleasing is a block to intimacy, because we're essentially putting on this mask, this costume. Let me perform at what I think or you think is a quote unquote good partner, good something.
Yeah.
And we are hiding aspects of ourselves because we're afraid that if we truly show ourselves and we allow ourselves to be ourselves, that we're going to run the risk of not being picked and that we're going to experience rejection. And so, but if we're pretending to be something we're not, if we're saying yes when we really mean no, if we're really kind of going out of our way to disguise our needs, desires, expectations, feelings, and opinions, we are not showing up for that relationship. And what people find the hardest is that they will do all of that. And this is where I'll get them, where they will be like a wreck on the floor about it, destroyed about it for weeks, months, even sometimes years on end, that you would go to such lengths to please someone, to prove your goodness, to prove your worthiness. And so you'll be like, I like what you like, and doing all the things, and you'll not raise certain issues, and you're like, won't have certain boundaries. And then they're not interested anyway.
Yeah.
Or they're not the partner that you want them to be, or you break up, or they skip on down the road and pick someone else. So then we're like, why am I in so much pain over it? Because we feel as if we've hidden ourselves because of our fear of being rejected. And now even the person that we're pretending to be, which we think will please everyone, is also being rejected. So then we think, well, what does that mean? What hope is there for us? But there is no relationship without the intimacy, because without the intimacy, you don't have the love, care, trust, and respect. How are you going to build a relationship based on being a fake you?
Exactly. Yeah, this was one of the hard lessons for me to learn in dating, is by trying to prove your goodness, your worthiness, being the people pleaser, being very accommodating, right? Very giving, very go with the flow, very yes and, never having a boundary, never saying no. Ultimately, it's where is the intimacy? Where's the vulnerability? Because you're not really showing up with your wants and desires necessarily in the dating process. You're mirroring the other person's. It's always yes and go with the flow. And so ultimately the other person can't get to know you because you're not 100%. Bringing your deeper self into the connection. Yeah.
Yeah. And people will say, I've often had people say to me, oh, me and my partner, we never fight. Or after the breakup, like we never fought. That's not a badge of honor, people.
No.
Yeah. Because conflict is a part of intimacy. You need to know that you're willing to go there.
Yes.
You need to be willing to run the risk of conflict, not for conflict's sake. We're not talking about, those people who'd have a fight with a paper bag, right?
Right.
I'm talking about like, you need to show up in a way that runs the risk of showing differences. Because
so important.
Please stop pretending that you and your partner are exactly the same person, that you think exactly the same things you need. Well, you don't. And if you're still sitting there thinking, oh no, like we do, you don't. And conflict is part of intimacy because you come at, you run the risk of showing differences, realize, yes, okay, we have deeper understanding of each other, and you come out the other side of it. But if you're always avoiding conflict and criticism, right? If you're always avoiding basically being or doing anything that will like give people an impression about you, then no, you won't be seen in your relationships. And do you know what people struggle with about that? Like, I'll have people say to me, I was everything to this person. I was exactly what they wanted. And, they turn around and they were like, I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't feel like I know you. And they're like, I just don't understand why they'd finish with me. I was being everything that they wanted. And it's like, only somebody who is abusive wants their partner to basically be a puppet. It's really unnerving to be in a relationship with someone where you don't really know where you stand, where you can't trust that when they say yes to you, that's exactly what they mean. Where you start to get this feeling like, actually, it feels like I could pretty much say or do anything. And they go, okay, cool. That's not comforting for somebody who actually wants a mutually fulfilling, intimate relationship with love, care, trust, and respect. An abuser, sure. You can turn around and perform at whatever, and they will use that to your advantage. But like, what kind of relationship is that anyway?
Exactly. Yeah. I always say having a conflict or two in the early dating process, super helpful, even if it's just as simple as you can't agree on where to go to dinner or like what to do with your Saturday afternoon. It doesn't have to be some knockdown, drag out disagreement or argument, but just seeing how someone responds when they don't get their way or when you do say no or when you do assert a boundary. Very, very important. Oh, I'm not available Friday, but how about Saturday, right? Like, yeah.
Hey, Benjamin, you could see me like, I'm like here. Because honestly, I say to people, until you've experienced someone in a variety of contexts, until you've been showing up as yourself and expressing your boundaries. And when we say expressing boundaries, it just means expressing our yeses and nos authentically. So really showing up as ourselves, right? Until you've given and received no in your relationship, right? You do not know that person that well. Right. If you haven't navigated, conflict, criticism, stress, disappointment, and it's not necessarily that it's all even about your relationship. You need to see the person in a variety of contexts. Some of that stress or disappointment might come from, for instance, their friends or their family member, but you need to see how each of you operate within these contexts and how that plays out with the two of you being together. Because if your relationship can't survive a no, then you have no business being in a relationship with that person.
That is so true. I want to ask you about this experience now, if you see with recovering people pleasers, because I feel like I had this experience personally where you start to build some self-awareness around your people-pleasing tendency, maybe your people-pleasing style, noticing when you're doing it, and then starting to make some of those changes with your habits, with your actions, with your communication, with your mindset. And then sometimes the pendulum can swing the other way where, right? Maybe we were very accommodating and giving, and now all of a sudden we find ourselves in a period of isolation, perhaps. We're saying no to everything. Everyone is maybe out to get us. We're having a hard time trusting others. So I just wanted to ask you about that experience as well.
So I always say to people that unless your life calls for it in that moment, and yes, sometimes it does, do not expect that, for instance, you would listen to a conversation like this or do some work around, your boundaries and self-care and loving yourself, and that then you should just be like firing off no's all over the place. Because for a start, that's pretty triggering for you.
Yeah.
It'll feel like a lot's coming at you all at once. Now, of course, if life calls for it, where for some reason you are going through something in your life at the moment where it's popping off left, right, and center, and you realize, ooh, I'm in too deep here, and the only way out of this is just be like, no. Great. But generally speaking, I would say, like, start gently and start as you mean to go on and be consistent. However, it is too much to expect that people who may have become very used to you being very accommodating, always saying yes, it is too much to expect that they'll go, oh my God, thank you so much for turning around and saying no this time. I had no idea. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is not real life. How people respond to your boundaries, or, any communication of those, how people respond to your yeses and nos speaks more for what's going on internally with them and for the overall dynamic of your relationship, not for the validity of your boundaries, right? And the thing is, where people run awry is that they will express something and they'll be starting to show more of themselves, and they will start to be like, you know what, actually I can't do that, or whatever it is. And then the moment that they get a whiff of discontent, a whiff of something, they're like, oh my God, take it back, it's okay. And the thing is that you have to be consistent, otherwise people don't know what to expect from you. And so if one day you're like, okay, no, I can't do that, then the following day it's like, no, roll over, and then the following day they go, oh, I don't really know what to do with that. So give people some grace in the sense of sometimes it takes a bit of an adjustment. It is annoying. Let's be real. Like, let's be honest here. It's okay to feel like, well, hold on a second. Isn't it a little bit off that because I am not so like accommodating as I used to be anymore, that you're kind of like being a little bit, it's okay for you to feel that way about it, right?
Okay.
But there is an adjustment going on in the relationship. Yeah.
Yes.
And people who value like a mutual relationship will gradually adjust with you. Where, and look, I've had it where when I started to realize that I need to have some boundaries, I let's say I broke a few eggs. Yeah. I was clumsy in my approach. It is a learning process to think that you are going to go from what might be a people pleaser on steroids to suddenly like you are queen or king of assertiveness. You have it all down pat. You always say everything. That's not how it goes. Right. So expect there to be clumsiness. And I think as well, really check in with yourself. Like, do they really have a problem with it?
Yes.
Because sometimes we're kind of projecting that onto people.
Yes.
And I say this because a part of how we got ourselves into this tangle with people pleasing is we do sometimes villainize our loved ones. So we will rationalize to ourselves, well, I've got to say yes to that thing because because if I don't, then they're going to be pissed off with me. You know, they're going to reject me. There's going to be a fight, blah, blah, blah. You need to be honest with yourself about the relationships that you're in, because if there's genuine space for love, care, trust, and respect in a relationship, does that person really want to feel that each time you say yes to them, you're doing it under duress?
Yeah.
Now, if they don't, if you feel like actually that person would be pretty taken aback to discover that you emotionally blackmail yourself.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Into doing things with or for them, then I think you can afford to have the boundary. Now, I also say, if you start being more honest about who you are and what you need, desire, expect, feel, and think, it's not that, of course, people are going to roll over, but if shit pops off, right, if it feels like, they're losing their wig over the whole thing, it tells you that that your boundaries, that your honesty, that your authenticity was overdue.
Yes.
Like, that's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you that your boundaries are bad. It doesn't tell you that you are bad. What it's telling you is about the dynamic of the relationship, and this person is resenting not having power over you not being willing to capitulate how you used to. But it's like, actually, the yes buffet is closed. Thank you very much. And,
it's all so good. I'm definitely going to come back and listen to this part of the conversation again, because one thing I've had to learn is, as you're starting to recover from being definitely a people pleaser on steroids, and you're starting to renegotiate, in a sense, your connections and your relationships, the thing about boundaries and saying no is this is you trying to keep someone in your life, not push them away. Right.
Amen.
Like that was a light bulb moment for me, that like, wait a second, me having a boundary, saying no, being assertive, standing up for myself, expressing a need, a want and desire. This is me saying, I value you. I want to have you in my life. Right.
Amen.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like, you get it, because people are always like, oh my gosh, like they think that boundaries, be more honest about who you are. Oh, you're alienating people and you're telling people what to do. And it's no all the time. And it's like, no, boundaries are actually about you wanting to deepen your relationships.
Yes.
Because why you want to sit around in resentment and frustration and like depression and guilt and anxiety all the time? At the end of the day, if you actually want to have closer relationships, you are going to need to be more honest. And I think one of the mistakes that we make is assuming that everyone knows exactly how we're feeling about stuff. And we do this because as people pleasers, we're always going around going, I know what they're feeling and thinking, and that's why I want to go and do this pleasing. And so like we're always sort of reading and, other people's feelings and behavior, but we're reading it from this perspective of, oh my gosh, what bad thing could happen to me? But the fact of the matter is that people don't know your line, your limits, your capacity. They don't even know your wants if you don't communicate them. How can people know a line you didn't even communicate? Yeah. But also, when we make these changes, sometimes we don't bring people in on them. And so if we don't turn around and say, do you know what? I can see, I've been doing some work on myself because, I went through a tricky time when, I don't know, maybe I went for a breakup or I had this difficult thing at work. And I realized that actually I could be quite a people pleaser in certain contexts. And it was really, really starting to bring down my self-esteem. I had a lot of anxiety around it, whatever your particular impacts were. Like you realized that you were carrying a lot of resentment towards friends, and I don't want to feel that way. And somebody who values intimacy, who wants the same things you want. So that's the compatibility piece. So you share similar core values, even if a conversation is awkward initially, because they value the same things, because you're coming from a similar place of awareness, at least, they'll be like, okay, I see where you're coming from. But if you're in your own head about all of this stuff, which happens to the best of us, and you're like, hey, I'm doing this people pleasing, and I know all of my reasons, you can't expect that everybody else is going to know it.
Exactly.
And so sometimes where that sense of alienating can come from is it can feel like we're sometimes maybe being a bit punitive, or that we're kind of riding solo in our approach to it. Whereas actually bring people in, not because you have to over-explain about who you are, where you're coming from, but sometimes people just need a little bit of a context. But as I said, don't over-explain.
Don't over-explain, because I've had this experience, I know the Flirties have too, where a lot of us identify as sensitive people on the empathic side of things, givers, helpers, doers. And so in renegotiating this relationship, this connection we have to ourselves with our own people-pleasing ways and tendencies, sometimes we feel like we lose or we have to give up part of that. And that was something that was really difficult that I had to sit with for a while. And then I realized, wait a second, I actually want to lean into that more.
Yes.
I just want to be more intentional about how I do it, so I don't sacrifice and abandon my own self and just give all of my internal resources away to people that may be more than willing to take and not necessarily give back or compromise or understand or seek to see the value in what I'm doing, what I'm offering, my true talents and abilities. So it's, that was part of the people-pleasing recovery learning process for me.
Hey, amen. I mean, Benjamin, you are speaking my language on here, because honestly, I think that the people will often say, but Natalie, am I not going to turn into an ass clown now because, I'm cutting back on people pleasing? Which honestly, if that's it, whenever you hear the word boundaries or cutting back on people pleasing or saying no or self-care, if the first thing that you tend to think is along the lines of, but people are going to think I'm an asshole, or I'm going to be this terrible person, or I'm going to stop being a good person, All that's pointing to is your baggage around all of these areas.
Right.
People pleasing is a misappropriation of your good qualities. It is a misappropriation of your bandwidth. So where you're spending your attention, your time, energy, efforts, and emotions. What's happening is you've got these great qualities, but you are misusing and sometimes abusing them.
Yeah.
And the thing is I always say, for instance, with giving, if you don't feel good after you give, it's because it's not really giving. And some of what we call giving is really abusing ourselves and entering people into hidden contracts with a hidden agenda.
Yes.
Because people pleasing always contains a hidden agenda. It's like, if I do this, then you'll perceive me in this way, or you'll reward me in this way, or I'll get to avoid this thing, or whatever it might be. And that's not healthy. And you can be a quote unquote good person. You can give and you can do all the things with boundaries.
Yes.
Because if you don't do it with boundaries, so you don't do it from this place of being more of who you really are and with a sense of, oh, this is where I end and where you begin, and this is where my responsibilities versus your responsibilities, you will abuse yourself.
Yeah.
You will allow people to use you, and you will call it giving and generosity and kindness and care, when, as you called it, Benjamin, it's self-abandonment, and it's not the same thing.
It's absolutely. Oh my gosh, this is so good. This conversation has gone by, just flown by. I want to ask just one more question here before we conclude. I want to set the flirties up with a strategy or two for saying no, starting to assert those boundaries if they're in the early part of their people-pleasing recovery journey. And I also wanted to call out this one thing really fast that I think ties back into how we might become people pleasers, so to speak. And that's the way we're socialized. Like, I think, to be called a good girl versus a good boy, there's different connotations.
Absolutely.
For what that means and what that looks like, right? It's a nuance that's not so nuanced when it's internalized and really plays out in how we act in dating, in our relationships, in our career and education. So I wanted to, kind of highlight that really fast, but then lead into this final question about how we can start showing up more for ourselves and start saying no a time or two.
Yeah, I think so. From the socialization and conditioning point of view, you are so right that something I say in the book is about how you have that message of good girls do this and good boys do this. So good girls, be meek, be mild, be kind, be sweet, don't make waves, all of that. Good boys don't show emotions, don't cry, right? Also, a good boy is supposed to be aggressive when it's called on for you to be aggressive, right? So display these manly qualities, right? And which can often be sometimes these displays of toxic masculinity. And it's like, also being a good boy means don't do anything where that could cause us to think that you're a girl. Yeah. So there's all of this messed up. And tied in within that will be your place within the family. So, you might be the eldest or the youngest or in the middle or whichever. But
so true.
When we look at all of us are affected by this socialization and conditioning, but women, are conditioned, women and girls are conditioned to be givers and to sacrifice. And there is more threat for us in terms of saying no, right? It is a no-no. And in fact, when you look at the problems that we face in the world, it is about who's allowed to say yes and who's not allowed to say no, right?
Yeah.
We're with boys and men, then it's like the people-pleasing thing becomes about actually the way to please is to fit the mold of what society has decided a boy and a man is. And so for girls, it becomes like hide yourself, suppress, give, be meek, mild, sweet. Whereas for men, it's like actually do all of these things and you will advance yourself in ways that allow you to bloom and you get to say no. And bringing it actually back into dating, and speaking particularly to the heteronormative relationships, the idea is if a man expresses interest in a woman, she's not supposed to say no. And it can be offending to some if she says no. Yeah. And then actually, if she goes on a date, but she turns around and says, oh, actually, I don't want to go on any more dates. People are like, but why wouldn't you want to? You're supposed to do the pleasing thing and go on more dates.
Yeah.
If she then turns around and says, I like you, but actually, I don't want to get married to you. Why not? You should want to get married. Or I don't want to have kids. Or I only want to have one kid. Or I don't want to live with you. It's like, no, you're not allowed to say no. You should be really grateful that a man is interested in you in the first place, that a man wants to give you a ring. And it's like, actually, this is all pretty jacked up. And then for men, it's like, actually, how am I supposed to allow myself to feel, to connect with who I am as a person when all signals and all messages that I've received have said, I'm not going to be the right type of man if I do those things. Right. And so they can struggle around intimacy. They can struggle around like their mental health. Like that's why there can be those really high suicide rates for men. Yeah. But it's isolating in different ways and in similar ways on both sides. And this is why we have to start confronting why we are not saying no when we need, want to, and should. Because whatever the answer is, that's our emotional baggage. That is the only reason we don't say no when we need, want to, and should, because of emotional baggage. And speaking then to, I know you wanted like a couple of quick tips. So easy ways in is notice what I call the people pleaser feelings. So these are anxiety, guilt, resentment, feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, helpless, powerless, low, frustrated. All of those feelings tell you that you are either doing what, for all intents and purposes, might have seemed like a good thing, but for the wrong reasons, or that you did want to do the thing, but the way you're going about it is harmful to your well-being. So it's like, is it that you shouldn't be doing this thing at all? Or is it you just need to change your approach? And often it can be a lot of that in dating is like, I'm just breaking myself here when I don't need to. The other thing then is if you're someone who's like, do you know what? I wouldn't even know my feelings if it bit me on the ass. Then the way to go is notice the people pleaser thought. So someone asks you to do something and outwardly you go, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll do that. Inwardly, you're like, shit. Oh my God, the audacity of this person. Or you're thinking, well, if I don't do this, then they're going to think blah, 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 blah about me. And what am I going to do then? Those kind of thoughts are letting you know where your people pleasing is showing up for you. And the other thing is make it a desire, not an obligation. Stop emotionally blackmailing and forcing yourself into stuff. So notice, is this something I want to do or do I feel like I have to do it? And when you start to notice the difference between those two things, you can really start to see where the land lies and get yourself out of a lot of people pleasing problems.
Yes. Wow. That is so helpful even for me, still very much right in my people-pleasing recovery journey, but it's so empowering when you start to renegotiate that relationship, that connection you have with yourself. It then starts to change everything in your external world as well. I have so enjoyed this conversation. Yes, where can the Flirties find you, follow you, listen to the podcast, and learn more?
I have so enjoyed our conversation too, Benjamin. So you can find me at baggagereclaim.com. And we've got the podcast, the Baggage Reclaim Sessions, which is available on all podcast players and is soon be approaching 300 episodes.
Oh,
wow.
My gosh.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And I'm also, thank you. Wow. I do a little bit of social. So the best place to find me social media wise is Instagram. I'm Nat Lue, Natlue. And of course, you've got my book, The Joy of Saying No, which was published by Harper Horizon, HarperCollins, and is available wherever books are sold.
Amazing. I will have all those links in the show notes below for this episode. Natalie Lue, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today.
Benjamin, you were such good fun to chat with. I loved our conversation. So thank you for having me.
All right, Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the people-pleasing episode of the program. Thank you so much to Natalie Lue for coming on the show today. An absolute dream collaboration. Another one here in the books at Flirt headquarters. If you have not listened or are just learning about the Baggage Reclaim Sessions podcast, highly recommend you give an episode a listen, find another one, and then listen to that one. It is so good. It's on my binge list right now. Her books, all the links are there for you in the show notes below for this episode. Her socials, particularly her Instagram, is there for you if you're looking for more work, more information, more knowledge, awareness, tips, tricks, anything really about people pleasing. It is all there for you, Flirties. Look no further. Thank you so much, Natalie, for being on the show today. Okay, Flirties, to you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for tuning in, for streaming, wherever you may be in the world. None of this would be possible without you. Indeed, all of this is for you. I hope you, enjoyed this episode. You got a takeaway, right? A mindset shift, a puzzle piece that shifted into place, a dot was connected, something. I know. Yeah, you got exactly what you needed. Yeah, thank you for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. Share this episode or another favorite episode of Flirtations with a friend or someone you want to share some BFE, Big Flirt energy with. Yes, that's going to do it for me here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. Signing off officially, the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.